BYD just announced they can charge an electric vehicle in 10 minutes, almost as fast as filling up a gas tank. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. How does a company most people have never heard of suddenly have technology that makes Tesla look slow? And it gets weirder. In 2023, BYD outsold Tesla globally, not in China. Globally, they moved more electric vehicles than the company everyone thinks owns the future. And if you're like most people watching this, you probably couldn't tell me what BYD even stands for. That's not an accident. C. While Tesla was building a brand, BYD was building something else, something quieter, something the traditional auto industry didn't see coming until it was already too late to catch up. This isn't a story about a competitor. It's a story about a company that rewrote the rules while everyone else was still reading the old playbook. And the most unsettling part, they didn't do it by beating Tesla at Tesla's game. They did it by playing a completely different game, one that started decades ago. In a place no one was looking, a chemist named Wang Chuanfu is watching the world change. Mobile phones are starting to spread, those chunky Nokia bricks, and every single one needs a battery. Wang sees an opening. He gathers a team of 20 people and $300,000 and starts a company, BYD. It stands for Build Your Dreams. But back then, it just made batteries. Small ones. For phones, and for a while, that's all it was. A battery supplier. Reliable, cheap, forgettable. Then in 2003, something strange happens. Wang buys a car company. A small, struggling automaker called Kinchuan Automobile, and the industry doesn't know what to make of it. A battery company buying a car manufacturer? It seemed random, desperate, even like a side bet that probably wouldn't pay off. But here's what they missed. Wang wasn't buying a car company. He was buying control. Think about it. Everyone else in the auto world, Tesla, GM, Volkswagen, Toyota, they all build cars. But they don't build the most important part. The battery, they buy it from someone else. Panasonic, LG, CATL. They negotiate. They wait. They deal with shortages and price hikes and supply chain chaos. Wang saw that dependency coming, and he decided not to have it. So while the world saw a battery maker awkwardly stepping into the car business, Wang saw the future. Whoever controls the battery controls the car. And in 2003, he made a move that wouldn't make sense for another 15 years. The tension here isn't that BYD entered the car industry. It's that they entered it for a reason no one else understood yet. Fast forward to 2008. The global economy is collapsing. Lehman Brothers just went under. Automakers are begging for bailouts. And in the middle of all this chaos, Warren Buffett, one of the most cautious, calculating investors on the planet, writes $230 million Australian check to BYD, not to Tesla, which was already getting headlines. Not to a proven car company. To a Chinese battery-on-car startup most Americans had never heard of. And people noticed, but not for the right reasons. The headlines called it a bet on China's green future. A feel-good investment in clean energy. But that's not what Buffett does. He doesn't make feel-good bets. He finds structural advantages that other people miss. So what did he see? He saw a company that didn't need to ask permission. While every other automaker was fighting for battery supply, BYD was the battery supply, while others were figuring out how to build electric cars. BYD had already been building the hardest part for over a decade. Buffett didn't just give BYD money. He gave them something more valuable, legitimacy. A signal to the world that this wasn't some speculative side project. This was real. And here's where it gets interesting. The investment didn't just validate BYD, it changed what BYD could do, because now they had cover. Permission to move faster, to scale bigger, to stop playing defense, and start setting terms. By 2010, BYD launched the F3DM, the world's first mass-produced plug-in hybrid. Not Tesla, not Toyota, BYD. But the meaning of that moment wouldn't become clear until much later, when everyone else realized what Buffett already knew. The company that controls the battery doesn't just compete in the car industry. They reshape it. Here's the part that should make every legacy automaker uncomfortable. In 2020, BYD unveiled something called the Blade battery. And on the surface, it sounds boring. a new type of lithium iron phosphate battery. Safer, more efficient, longer lasting. But let me show you what safer actually means. There's a test in the battery world, the nail penetration test. You take a fully charged battery and drive a steel nail through it. Most lithium-ion batteries, they overheat, smoke, sometimes explode. BYD ran the test on the Blade. Battery live, in front of cameras. The nail went in, and nothing, no smoke. No fire, the battery didn't even get hot. Tesla's batteries failed that test. So did the ones from LG and Panasonic. But BYD's, DIDN, single quotes T. Now, you might think, okay, cool, it's safer. But here's the real reason this matters. Every other car company, Tesla, Ford, GM, they're all dependent on someone else's battery technology. They don't control it, they license it, buy it, negotiate for it. And when there's a shortage, or a safety recall, or a price spike, they're stuck. BYD isn't, because they don't just use the Blade battery. They invented it, they manufacture it, they own it, and they're not selling it to competitors. This is the delayed meaning from 2003 unlocking. When Wang bought that car company, everyone thought he was late to the auto industry. But he wasn't entering the auto industry. He was creating a vertical. Monopoly. Batteries, motors, electronics, assembly. All in-house, while Tesla was building partnerships. BYD was building independence. And here's the kicker. The Blade battery isn't just safer. It's cheaper to produce. It lasts longer, and it packs more energy into less space. Which means BYD's cars can go farther without needing massive, expensive battery packs. So now BYD has something no one else has. A structural advantage that can't be copied by throwing money at the problem. You can't outspend independence, but this only matters once you see what happened next, because having better technology is one thing. Using it to reshape an entire industry, that's something else. And what BYD did with that advantage is where the story starts to get uncomfortable, especially if you're running a traditional car company. China passes Japan to become the world's #1 car exporter, not just electric cars. All cars. And BYD is leading the charge. Their CEO, Wang Chuanfu, makes a statement that should have been a wake-up call. He says, China's electric vehicle industry is 3 to 5 years ahead of the rest of the world, and the gap isn't closing. 3 to 5 years. Let that sit for a second on. In the tech world, that's the difference between dominance and irrelevance, and Wang isn't bluffing. BYD's newest models, the Han L, the Tang L, they're not just keeping up with Tesla. In some ways, they're surpassing it. The Han L has a 945-volt electrical system. It charges from 16% to 80% in 10 minutes under the right conditions. And it can still fast charge in under 24 minutes at -30 degrees Celsius. Tesla's superchargers are fast. But BYD is matching that speed while also making it work in climates where other systems fail. And then there's efficiency. BYD's plug-in hybrid, the Song Plus DMI, gets the equivalent of over 90 miles per gallon. It sips 6 liters of fuel per 100 kilometers. For a hybrid SUV, that's almost unheard of. And the price, a fraction of what you'd pay for a comparable Tesla or European EV. Here's where it gets existential for the legacy automakers. Tesla can build superchargers. Volkswagen can pour tens of billions into R&D. GM can hire battery experts and launch new EV platforms, but none of them can do what BYD does: control the entire supply chain. BYD doesn't wait for battery shipments. They don't negotiate chip shortages. They don't get stuck when a supplier raises prices. They just build, and while Western automakers are still trying to secure partnerships and stabilize costs, BYD is scaling fast. They're entering Europe, Southeast Asia, Latin America. They've even set up a factory in California making electric buses and trucks. Over 700 sold in North America alone. The uncomfortable question starts forming here. What if this lead isn't just big? What if it's unrecoverable? What if tariffs, trade wars, and political friction don't actually matter when one company has spent 20 years building a system no one else can replicate? Here's what the traditional automakers are trying to do right now. Ford is spending $50 billion on EV. GM is retooling factories. Volkswagen is launching new electric platforms. Tesla is scaling production and cutting prices. And all of that makes sense. It's the logical response. But here's the problem. They're all trying to catch up to BYD by doing what BYD was already doing 10 years ago. BYD isn't standing still. The US and Europe have thrown up tariffs 17% in Europe. Steep restrictions in the US, too, slow the flood of cheap Chinese EVs. And on paper, that should work. It should give legacy automakers time to catch up. But BYD is already working around it. They're building factories in Mexico, in Europe, in Thailand. They're not trying to export their way into these markets anymore. They're becoming local. And once they do that, the tariffs disappear. It's the same playbook Japanese automakers used in the 1980s when they faced trade barriers. They just started building cars in the US. Problem solved.